Welcome to Chibuzor Mathphysics. In today's video, I will be taking you through the law of flotation. The law of flotation states that a floating body displays its own weight of the fluid on which it floats. Consider the ships, canoes, and ferry boats that move on the upper part of the water bodies. So we usually say that the float may happen due to the accident or overloading they sink. If we consider a balloon filled with lighter gas, such as hydrogen, if a balloon is filled with lighter gas, such as hydrogen, we know that this will keep rising up when released from the hand, and the hot air balloon will keep rising as well with the people in carriage once the air in balloon has been heated and expanded. Therefore, the law of flotation can be seen as the tendency of an object to rise up to the upper levels of the fluid or to stay on the surface of the fluid. So you can call it a tendency or a state where an object rises up to the upper levels of the fluid or to stay on the surface of the fluid. The opposite of flotation is sinking and can be defined as the tendency of an object to go to the lower level of the fluid. So the law generally states that a floating body displays its own weight of the fluid in which it floats. There are conditions for objects to float. The average density of that object should be less than the density of fluid in which the object has to float. This is one of those conditions that will enable that object to float. Let's take an example. If a ship, let's say that a ship is very heavy, but it floats because it is hollow inside. It contains air. This causes its average density to be lower than that of water. We call that the obtruse force of the fluid on the object must also be equal to the total weight of that object. And this is what we call the law of flotation. Let me to show you virtually using the law of buoyancy what we mean by flotation. So stay tuned and enjoy this physics, the practicality of our daily life in terms of the waterways and how we can explain the law of buoyancy. Let us consider a body that is acted upon by an upward force when it is completely or partially immersed or submerged in a fluid. This is equal in magnitude to the volume of fluid displaced, as we can see in the picture. And this equilibrium, if we talk about the equal in magnitude to the volume of the fluid displayed by the floating body, then we will say that we can imagine a ship placed on the water surface. When the ship is loaded with weight in different locations, concentration of weight is at one point called G, and the force of gravity acts vertically downward through its point and is called the center of gravity of a ship. This force is equal to the weight of the ship when the ship sinks in water, and the port forces act on the ship, contrary to the center of gravity. This force is called the buoyancy force. It is produced by the water around the ship. The buoyancy force is equal to the magnitude of the weight of the water displaced by the ship, and this force enables the ship to float. It is always at the geometric center of the underwater volume. Reserve that in terms of the intact volume of the ship above the waterline and up to the uppermost continuous depths, it is the space available for displacement if you load any additional weight to the ship. The self-buoyancy is expressed as the volume in cubic meter. The freshboard deck is the uppermost continuous deck freeboard, and this is the distance from the freeboard deck to the waterline. The freeboard determines the reserve buoyancy. If a ship has large freeboard, it is said to have large reserve buoyancy. A ship with large freeboard can withstand a significant amount of floating of compartment in case of damage and still remain a floating object or a floating ship with small freeboard, which can withstand a comparatively small amount of floating of compartment in case of damage before it sinks. The freeboard determines the angle at which the deck edge immersion the ship is heeled. The deck edge of the vessel with a large freeboard will emerge at a relatively large angle of heel. The deck edge of vessel with a small freeboard will emerge at a relatively small angle of heel. A vessel with a small freeboard will ship muscle on the deck in heavy weather than a ship with a large freeboard. This endangers personal deck, like cargo and deck fighting, such as hatchways. When the ship starts to the one side, the center of gravity will remain the same. However, the center of buoyancy shifts from B to B1 as shown because the underwater volume is more on the heeling side of the ship. This buoyancy force acts upwards through point B, metacenter, in the point where the line passing through B meets the line passing through G as indicated. The metacentric height is the distance from the center of gravity to the metacenter, the height of the metacenter, which is the distance from the keel to the metacenter. So in general, we can say that the buoyancy depends on the mass of the liquid displaced. So according to Archimedes' principle, we know that the buoyant force of a partially immersed body will be equal to the weight of the displaced liquid. Therefore, we say that the buoyant force depends upon the density of the fluid and the submerged volume of the body. In the next video, we shall be dealing with calculations that involve laws of flotation and the law of buoyancy and what buoyancy force depends on. I remain your friend, Augustine Gallagher. See you in our next video. Don't forget to click the subscribe button if you are new to this channel. See you and God bless you.